My name is Frank, and the day my own daughter threw bills at me and demanded rent in the very house I bought with my sweat and sacrifice, something inside me broke. She thought I was just an old man with nothing left but silence. But she didn't know the deed was still in my name, and that one decision would turn her world upside down. For years, I let them treat me like a tenant, like a burden, but what I did next would change everything, and when the truth came out, they would never look at me the same again. Before we begin, I want to ask, where are you watching this from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Revenge Untold to hear more stories that cut deep and stay with you. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning, though the memory still feels like a scar that never quite heals. My daughter Karen slammed a stack of bills onto the kitchen table so hard the coffee cup rattled. Her eyes, sharp as glass, cut into me as if I were nothing more than an unwelcome guest. "Dad, you need to start paying rent. If you can't, you'll have to move out." Her words sliced through me. Rent in this house. The very home I had built with my own hands and quiet sacrifices. I felt the air drain from my lungs, yet I said nothing. I just sat there staring at her face, so hardened, so impatient. Patrick, her husband, sat across from us, pretending to scroll through his phone, avoiding my eyes like he always did. He never stepped in when it came to Karen. He'd just clear his throat, mutter something about work, and slip out of the room as if disappearing could erase the cruelty that lingered behind. That morning was no different. Within minutes, he stood, kissed her on the cheek, and left me to face my own child's ultimatum alone. My chest ached as I looked at her, remembering the girl I once carried on my shoulders along the Ozark trails. The one who used to beg me for ice cream after church on Sunday afternoons, who clung to my hand during thunderstorms. That little girl was gone. What sat in front of me now was a woman hardened by ambition, blinded by entitlement, who saw her father not as a man, but as a ledger line dragging her down. "Are you listening?" she snapped, shoving the bills closer. "Taxes are higher, insurance is going up. You sit here all day while we work to keep this place afloat. It's not fair." I wanted to tell her the truth, that the house had been mine since 2004, when a winning lottery ticket had given me the chance to buy it outright. That every check I had handed her in the past years was nothing but money shuffling from one of my accounts to another, a charade I allowed so she could feel in control. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded as if agreeing to the shame she laid at my feet. My hands trembled slightly as I folded the bills and slid them into my pocket. I could hear Margaret's voice in my head, my late wife, reminding me to choose peace over conflict, dignity over shouting matches. But I also felt her absence like a wound. Without her, Karen had lost her compass. Without her, this family had cracked open. Karen leaned closer, her voice low, almost mocking. "So what's it going to be, Dad? Can you pay, or should I start looking for somewhere else to put you?" I met her eyes not with anger, but with something heavier, resolve. I didn't answer then. I didn't need to. She thought she had cornered me, but she had no idea the ground beneath her feet was mine. And one day soon, she would learn just how wrong she was. That night, after Karen had gone upstairs and the house fell into its usual silence, I sat in my room staring at the photograph of Margaret on my desk. Her smile, frozen in sunlight from decades past, seemed to ask me a question I didn't have the strength to answer. "Where did we go wrong?" I whispered. "Maybe I gave too much. Maybe I never taught our children the weight of respect." The walls seemed to close in around me, echoing Karen's ultimatum, "Pay more or get out." The shadows of the room felt heavier than usual. I sat at the edge of the bed, my hands trembling, replaying the memory of Karen's face when she slammed those bills in front of me. That look, cold, businesslike, as if I were nothing more than a tenant, burned deeper than any wound. And what hurt more was the absence of her mother's warmth, the softness that once kept this family from hardening into stone. I tried to remind myself of who Karen had been. I could still see her little legs dangling from the church pew, swinging as she leaned into my arm. I remembered her laughter echoing through the woods when she spotted deer on those long hikes in the Ozarks. I remembered her voice begging for one more scoop of vanilla on hot July evenings. All those memories felt like someone else's story now, like photographs tucked away in a stranger's album. The bitterness in her eyes earlier that day had erased all trace of the girl I had loved so fiercely. She didn't see me as her father anymore. She saw me as a burden, an old man sitting in a chair draining her life with every breath. I ran my fingers along the worn edge of Margaret's photo, fighting back tears. For years I had stayed quiet. I had written checks, endured demands, listened to lectures, and chosen silence. I told myself I was keeping peace, that arguing would only tear us further apart. But sitting there alone, I realized that silence had not brought peace. It had only given them permission to trample over me. The house groaned with the night pipes settling the refrigerator, humming the floor, creaking with memories. I pulled open the drawer and slipped my hand into the envelope that lay hidden there. Inside was a single business card, Thomas Grant, Ozark Realty Group. He had told me just last week that house could go for $720,000, maybe $760,000 in this market. Springfield's hot right now. His words had seemed casual at the time, but tonight they felt like a lifeline. I held the card between my fingers, rubbing the edges until it felt warm, almost alive. The thought that I held the real power, the deed, the history, the right, was both terrifying and liberating. Karen believed she held all the cards, but she was standing on ground that wasn't hers. I slid the card back into the envelope and tucked it away again. Not tonight, I told myself. Tonight I would keep silent. But when the moment came, my answer would be louder than any words Karen had ever thrown at me. The next morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the blinds, striping the floor like prison bars. I shuffled into the kitchen, hoping for a quiet start. But peace is something my daughter no longer allowed me. Karen was already there, moving briskly around the counter's heels, striking the tile like a judge's gavel. Without looking at me, she set a mug of coffee on the table. "Have you made a decision, Dad? I can't wait forever." Her tone was sharp, businesslike, the way a landlord might speak to a tenant. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into my palms, grounding me against the sting of her words. "I told you," I said softly. "I'll handle it." She turned, her eyes narrowing. "That doesn't mean anything. You say a lot of things. What I need is an answer I can trust." Her words cut deeper than she realized. Once my voice had been enough to guide her through life, when she was afraid of the dark, when she doubted herself in school, when she cried over her first heartbreak. Back then, she trusted me. Now she looked at me like I was a liar, a man too old to be believed. Before I could respond, Patrick came down the stairs, already dressed for work. He gave me the same half nod he always did, nothing more. It wasn't cruelty, it was cowardice. He'd never stand up to Karen, never risk her fury. Instead, he buried himself in paperwork and slipped out of the house at the first sign of tension. That morning, he was gone before I finished my coffee, leaving only the echo of the door shutting behind him. I sat there in silence, the mug cooling in my hands. Karen hovered, waiting for me to yield, but I stayed quiet. She muttered under her breath and marched out, the click of her heels fading up the stairs. For a moment, I thought I could breathe again. Then Emily bounded down, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her smile warm as sunshine. "Morning, Grandpa," she said, kissing my cheek before pouring herself orange juice. Her presence softened the air. She asked about my sleep, about whether I was eating enough, her concern wrapped in the careless chatter of youth. I gave her the same answer I always did. I'm fine, though I wasn't. But her eyes searched mine as if she could see through the lie. Karen's voice cut in sharply from the hallway. Emily, grab your jacket, or you'll be late. Emily rolled her eyes but leaned close before leaving. Don't let Mom stress you out, Grandpa. She gave me a quick squeeze, then hurried out the door. When the house finally quieted, I stared at the folded bills in my pocket. My daughter thought she held all the power. She believed I was just a man waiting for eviction. But as the morning light stretched across the table, I knew a truth she couldn't imagine. She was building her fortress on sand, and when the tide came, it would all wash away. By late afternoon, the sound of tires crunching gravel broke the stillness. I glanced out the window and saw Brian's truck in the driveway. My stomach sank. He never came empty-handed. He always came with a request, a demand dressed as desperation. The door swung open without a knock, his broad frame filling the doorway. Melissa trailed behind him, quiet as a shadow, her eyes darting nervously to the floor. Dad, Brian said, clapping his hands together like a salesman about to pitch a deal. We need to talk. He dropped into the chair across from me, leaning forward, elbows on the table. Work's been rough. Midwest Freight's contracts are drying up. I just need a little help to get through the month. $5,000 should cover it. Just until the next shipment comes in. His words were smooth, rehearsed, the same lines I had heard too many times before. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, twisting the strap of her purse, her lips parting, as if she wanted to soften his request. But she stayed silent. I met Brian's eyes and gave him nothing. Just silence. His smile faltered. You've always helped, before he pressed. Come on, Dad, you know I'll pay you back. I let out a slow breath, my voice low and steady. Brian, you're a grown man with a family of your own. It's time you figured this out without leaning on me. His jaw tightened, his face flushing red. I thought family was supposed to help each other. Or do you only care about Emily now? That jab cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Emily, the one soul in this house who still treated me like I mattered, had become his weapon against me. He wanted to turn her love into guilt. But I refused to let him. I pushed back my chair and stood my legs steadier than I felt. I've given you more than enough over the years, I said. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet. The veins in his neck bulged, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. Melissa's hand touched his arm gently, her voice soft. Brian, please. He jerked away from her, his fists clenched. Fine. Don't help me. Don't be surprised when everything falls apart. He stormed toward the door, slamming it so hard the walls trembled. Melissa lingered in the doorway, her eyes meeting mine with something like apology, pity, maybe sorrow. I'm sorry, she whispered, before slipping out after him. When the house finally stilled, I sat back down, my hands trembling as I rubbed my temples. First Karen with her threats, now Brian with his pleas. Both circling me like vultures, each waiting for me to crumble. I looked across the table at the photograph of Margaret, her smile frozen in a gentler world. I don't know where we went wrong, Maggie, I whispered, but I won't let them take what's left of me. In that moment, a quiet decision hardened in my chest. I wouldn't fight them with raised voices. I would fight them with silence, and with the truth they could never escape. That evening, the house was heavy with tension. Karen returned from work, her heels clicking like gunshots across the tile. She dropped her bag on the counter and looked at me sitting quietly at the table. Brian was here, wasn't he? She asked flatly. I nodded. She sighed sharply, shaking her head. He can't keep a job, can't manage money. And then he runs to you, and you probably told him no, which means he'll be calling me next, begging for help. You see why I need you to pay more now. You're not the only one draining this family." Her words stung, not because they were true, but because she believed them. To her, I was just another burden. "I already pay what you ask," I said evenly, "and I stay quiet about everything else. That should be enough." Her eyes hardened, her voice cutting like a blade. "It's not enough. Not anymore. You're going to have to step up, Dad, or I'll make arrangements for you." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, choking, suffocating. She left me there at the table, her perfume lingering behind like ashes. I sat motionless, my heart pounding. Every word she had spoken pressed on me like a stone. She truly believed she owned this house, that she held the power to uproot me from the place I had built with Margaret 2 decades earlier. When Emily came home later, she found me on the porch, staring at the fading light spilling across the neighborhood. She slipped her backpack off her shoulders and sat beside me, resting her head gently against my arm like she used to as a child. "You look tired, Grandpa," she whispered. I forced a faint smile. "It's been a long day." Her voice dropped lower, trembling with quiet anger. "I hate the way they talk to you. It's not right." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Don't worry about me, Emily. Focus on your studies. That's what matters." She tilted her head to look at me, her eyes glistening. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself." "I promise," I said, though the words tasted bitter on my tongue. Because deep down, I knew I was not safe here. I was a stranger in my own home, a man living on borrowed respect, waiting for the moment they pushed me out. Later, alone in my room, I pulled out the envelope hidden deep in my drawer. The realtor's card, the deed with my name bold across the bottom, the yellowed lottery stub from 2004, all the proof of who truly owned this place. My hands lingered on the paper, tracing the letters like they were carved in stone. "They think I'm powerless, Maggie," I whispered to the photo of my wife. "But they have no idea." For the first time in years, a calm strength settled over me. I wasn't going to answer Karen's threats with words. My answer would come when they least expected it, louder than any shouting match, final as thunder. The following morning, I woke with a heaviness pressing against my chest. But there was also something else flickering inside me, a spark. I moved slowly to the drawer where the envelope waited, the edges worn soft from years of hiding. Inside was the card from Thomas Grant of Ozark Realty. I held it between my fingers like it was a weapon, a lifeline, maybe both. His words from last week echoed in my mind. That house could easily go for $720, maybe $760. The market is hot right now. At the time, I'd brushed it aside, but after Karen's threats and Brian's demands, those numbers sounded less like estimates and more like freedom. I slipped the card into my shirt pocket and carried it with me into the kitchen, letting it rest close to my heart. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and disinfectant, Karen's Saturday ritual of scrubbing every surface until it gleamed. She believed a clean house meant a strong household, but I knew better. No shine could cover the cracks spreading through this family. Karen looked up from the sink when I entered. "Well, Dad, have you decided yet?" Her voice carried the smug assurance of someone who thought they had me cornered. I didn't answer. Instead, I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness ground me. She frowned, mistaking my silence for defeat. "Fine," she said curtly. "But I need an answer soon. I can't keep carrying you." I almost laughed at the irony. She thought she carried me when in truth she stood on ground. That was mine. I tucked the realtor's card deeper into my pocket, my secret shield. The day moved slowly, each hour heavy with unspoken words. Around noon, I stepped outside for some air. Doug, my neighbor from across the street, waved as he trimmed his hedges. He walked over, wiping sweat from his brow. "Frank, you ever think about selling this place? Houses on this street are going for crazy money right now. You'd make a killing." I forced a chuckle. "This house isn't on the market, Doug." He shrugged. "Just saying, if it were, you'd be looking at 750 easy. Folks are lining up for places like this." His words felt like confirmation, as if fate itself was reminding me that my escape, my revenge, was within reach. That evening, after Karen and Patrick went upstairs, I pulled out the deed again. My name, Franklin Miller, stared back at me in bold ink. Owner. Not tenant. Not burden. Owner. The lottery stub I had kept all these years lay beside it, yellowed with age, but still legible. Proof that I had built this life, that I had provided everything they took for granted. I pressed the papers flat with my hands, whispering into the quiet room, "They think I'm powerless. They think I'll cave. But soon they'll know the truth." It was the first time in years I felt something stir in me stronger than sorrow. It was resolve. The next day I was halfway through my paper when the front door swung open with a force that rattled the frame. Brian's heavy boots struck the floor like hammer blows. Melissa followed behind, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously between us. Dad Brian boomed, throwing his arms wide as if greeting an old friend. But his smile was too tight, his eyes too desperate. He dropped into the chair across from me and leaned in. "We need to talk." I folded my paper neatly and set it aside. "Go on, Midwest Freight's in trouble." He began, voice pitched somewhere between anger and pleading. "Contracts are drying up, layoffs are coming, and I'm stuck. I just need a little help to get through. 5,000, that'll do it. Just until the next load comes through." He said it like he was asking for a cup of sugar. Melissa sat down quietly beside him, twisting her hands in her lap. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but she stayed silent. I studied my son's face. This wasn't the first time I'd heard this speech. The numbers changed, the reasons shifted, but the story was always the same. He needed help, and I was expected to provide it. My chest tightened with a mix of anger and sorrow. I had given him so much already: money advice, second chances. But instead of standing on his own, he had learned to lean heavier on me every time life tested him. "You've always helped before." Brian pressed, his voice rising. "You can't just leave me hanging now." I let the silence stretch between us. His jaw worked, his fists clenched, and finally I said, calm and low, "Brian, you're a grown man with a family of your own. It's time you figured this out without leaning on me." His face turned crimson. "I thought family was supposed to help each other. Or do you only care about Emily now?" That jab landed hard. He knew Emily was my one comfort in this house, the one who still saw me as a man instead of a wallet. But I didn't flinch. I stood slowly, pushing back my chair. "I've given you more than enough over the years. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet." For a moment I thought he might lunge at me. His body trembled with fury, his breath coming sharp and fast. Then Melissa laid a hand on his arm. "Brian, please." He shoved his chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. "Fine. Don't help me. Don't be surprised when everything falls apart." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Melissa lingered. Her eyes met mine with a mixture of pity and apology. "I'm sorry," she whispered before hurrying after him. I sat back down, my heart pounding. The same words echoed in my head, 5,000 just until next time. But I knew there would always be a next time. Not anymore. This was the first time I had truly said no. And though my hands shook, I felt a strange relief settle over me. That night the house was unusually quiet, though my mind churned like a restless storm. I sat in my room, the lamp casting a soft glow across the desk where Margaret's photograph rested. Her smile caught in a summer long gone seemed to study me with patience. I wanted to ask her if I had failed. Failed as a father, failed as the man who once promised to protect his family from the world. But instead I whispered the truth I had held back all day. They think I'm weak, Maggie. They think I care only for Emily now. But they don't know what I still carry. I laid the deed flat on the desk, the paper crisp despite its years. Franklin Miller. Owner. Not Karen, not Brian, not anyone else. Mine. Alongside it, I placed the yellowed lottery stub, the beginning of it all. I traced the numbers with my fingertip, remembering that strange morning in 2004 when luck had smiled on me. With that ticket, I had secured a future, a home, a legacy. And now the very children I had built it for were circling me like vultures. Emily knocked gently before pushing the door open. She peeked in her face, soft but cautious. Grandpa, I quickly slid the papers under a folder. Come in, sweetheart. She crossed the room and perched on the edge of the bed, watching me with those careful eyes that seemed to see far beyond her years. Mom was upset again today. She said you weren't helping enough. Her voice dropped lower. But I don't believe her. I smiled faintly, though my chest ached. Don't worry about me, Emily. You just focus on your classes. She leaned closer, whispering as if afraid the walls might betray her. I see how they treat you. It's not fair. Don't let them make you feel like you don't matter. Her words pierced deeper than any insult Karen or Brian had thrown. For a moment I felt seen, not as a burden, not as a tenant, but as the man I still was. I reached out and squeezed her hand gently. You're a good girl. Don't ever lose that light. She gave me a quick hug, then stood. Promise me, Grandpa. Promise me you won't let them break you. I nodded, though the promise was already forming in another way. Not through words, but through action. She left the room, and the silence returned heavy, yet strangely steady. When the house settled into sleep, I pulled the papers out again. This time I didn't just stare at them. I spread them across the desk like a general laying out a battle map. The realtor's card rested on top, gleaming under the lamplight. They think I'll cave, I whispered. But the day is coming when they'll learn the truth. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt prepared. The following afternoon, I made the call. My hands trembled as I dialed the number on Thomas Grant's card, but my voice was steady when he answered. Mr. Grant, this is Frank Miller. About that house we spoke of. His tone brightened immediately. Frank, you picked the right time. Springfield's market is hotter than ever. We can get you top dollar $740, maybe more. Are you ready to move forward? I hesitated, the weight of years pressing on my chest. My children had no idea what I held in my drawer, no clue the ground beneath their feet was mine to move. For a moment I thought of Margaret again. I could almost hear her whisper, "It's time." I drew a long breath. "Yes," I said firmly. "Let's do it." When I hung up, my hands were still shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was relief. A fire burned inside me, steady and hot, as if a chain around my neck had fallen away. That evening, Karen cornered me in the hallway, her arms folded. "So have you made a decision? Are you paying more or not?" I looked at her calmly, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at my lips. "Don't worry, Karen. Everything will be taken care of soon." She mistook my words for surrender. Her shoulders relaxed, and a smirk spread across her face. "Good. I'm glad you're finally being reasonable." She turned and walked away, satisfied, never realizing that I had just signed the beginning of her undoing. In my room, I spread the documents across the desk once more: the deed, the stub, the realtor's preliminary agreement. The papers glowed under the lamplight, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. But it wasn't just about me. It was about every insult, every demand, every time they had treated me like a ghost, haunting my own home. My silence had been their weapon, but now silence was my shield. The days that followed passed like calm before a storm. Karen busied herself with her job at the bank. Patrick buried himself in paperwork, and Brian's voicemails piled up, each more frantic than the last. I listened to none of them. For once, I wasn't on the receiving end of their needs. I was the one holding the decision that would shake their world. One evening, Emily slipped into my room and found me staring at the stack of papers. She tilted her head. "What are those, Grandpa?" I slid the folder shut gently. "Just some old documents. Making sure things are in order." She studied me for a long moment, suspicion flickering in her eyes, but she didn't press. Instead, she reached for my hand. "Whatever it is, I hope it makes you happy." I smiled faintly, squeezing her fingers. "It won't make me happy, sweetheart, but it will set me free." And for the first time in years, I believed it. The night after I agreed to sell, I sat at the kitchen table, the house wrapped in silence. A pen lay beside the realtor's paperwork, its silver barrel gleaming under the light. I picked it up slowly, my pulse thrumming in my ears. For years, I had signed checks to keep the peace checks that bought me nothing but contempt. But this signature, this one, would not be for them. It would be for me. I pressed the tip to the page and wrote my name, each letter deliberate, each stroke a release. Franklin Miller. Owner. Seller. When I finished, I leaned back in my chair, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in decades, I felt in control of my own life. Later that evening, Karen appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "So have you figured it out? Are you paying or not?" I turned toward her calmly, the papers tucked neatly into the folder at my side. "Don't worry, Karen. Everything will be taken care of soon." She smirked, her lips curling with satisfaction. "Good. About time you listened." She turned on her heel and walked away, utterly convinced she had won. But I knew better. The next morning, the house seemed unchanged. The same polished counters, the same steady ticking of the clock in the hallway. But everything inside me had shifted. I moved through the rooms differently now, no longer as a man shrinking in the shadows, but as someone who carried a secret, powerful enough to shatter every illusion they clung to. Doug waved at me from across the street while trimming his hedges. "Morning, Frank. Don't forget what I told you. Houses like yours don't stay on the market long. You'd be looking at offers before the week's out." I gave him a small smile. "We'll see, Doug." But inside, I was already steadying myself for the storm that was coming. That evening, Emily found me in the garage sorting through boxes I hadn't touched in decades. Dust floated in the air like ghostly reminders of years gone by. She leaned against the doorframe, her brow furrowed. "What are you doing, Grandpa? Just making sure I don't leave a mess behind," I said, brushing dust off an old fishing rod. Her face fell. You're not leaving, are you?" I met her worried eyes and forced a small smile. "Not the way you think. I'm just making sure everything is in order." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly as though she understood more than she should. She stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. "I don't care what happens. I'm with you." Her words wrapped around me like armor. For all the bitterness I endured, I still had one ally who saw me as more than a burden. That night alone again in my room, I whispered to Margaret's photograph. "They think I've surrendered, Maggie, but I've only just begun." The storm hadn't hit yet, but the clouds were gathering. And when it broke, it would not be me who was swept away. Karen noticed before anyone else. It was small at first, the missing photo frames in the hallway, the boxes stacked neatly in my closet, the faint smell of cardboard in my room. She stood in the doorway one evening, arms folded tight, her eyes narrowing. "Why are you packing things up, Dad?" I didn't flinch. I'd been expecting this. I looked up from the chair where I sat folding an old blanket. Just organizing, making sure things are in order. She stepped into the room, her heels striking the wood like a drumbeat. "In order for what you planning something?" Her voice carried suspicion sharpened by years of control. I could see the calculations behind her eyes, the fear that maybe, just maybe, she didn't hold all the power after all. I gave her nothing but a calm smile. "Don't worry, Karen. Everything will be taken care of soon." She hated that answer. I could tell by the way her jaw tightened, her lips curling into frustration. "You always talk in riddles," she snapped. "This is my house, Dad. You live here because Patrick and I let you. Don't forget that." Her words should have cut deep, but they didn't. Not anymore. I had the deed. I had the papers. I had already signed them. She was the one living in a house of cards, and it was about to fall. Later that night, Patrick found me sitting on the porch. Unlike his wife, he didn't attack directly. He eased himself into the chair beside me, his tie loose around his neck, the faint smell of cigarette smoke clinging to him. "Karen says you're packing boxes," he began cautiously. I stared out at the quiet street, the glow of the street lamps stretching across the maple trees. "Just organizing," I said again. Patrick cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. "Look, Frank, you've been here a long time. We're trying to keep things steady. But if you can't help more Karen's right, we'll have to make other arrangements." Other arrangements. The words were softer in his mouth, but they carried the same threat. I turned to him slowly, my voice calm even. "I've lived in this house longer than you've been married to my daughter. Don't mistake my silence for weakness." He shifted uncomfortably, then stood muttering something about work. Just like always, he slipped away when the air grew heavy. I sat alone under the porch light, the night cool against my skin. They thought they had cornered me again, thought they were tightening the noose. But all they were doing was pushing me closer to the moment of revelation. Through the window, I saw Emily's face appear briefly at the top of the stairs. She gave me a small, reassuring smile before retreating to her room. That smile reminded me of why I endured, why I stayed calm in the face of their cruelty. The storm was gathering, and I knew the next strike wouldn't be mine. It would be theirs. The following afternoon, the sound of Brian's truck roared up the driveway like a warning bell. The slam of his door shook the windows, and before I could rise from my chair, he was already inside, his voice booming. "Dad, we need to talk now." Melissa trailed behind him, pale and withdrawn, her hands clutching her purse strap so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked like a woman dragged into a storm she had no power to stop. Brian barreled into the kitchen, planting his fists on the table. "You've been dodging me. Why aren't you answering my calls?" I folded the newspaper I'd been pretending to read and set it aside, my movements slow, deliberate, because I had nothing more to say. His face darkened, eyes narrowing into slits. "You think you can ignore me? I'm your son?" "You owe me." I let the silence linger before replying. "I don't owe you anything, Brian. You're a grown man. It's time you acted like one." His fists tightened his shoulders, quaking with rage. Melissa touched his arm gently, whispering, "Brian, please," but he shook her off, his eyes fixed on me like a predator. "Don't give me that lecture. You've always been there. You've always helped." And now suddenly you're too good, or maybe you just care more about Emily than your own son. The words were meant to cut to make me flinch. Instead, I sat taller, meeting his glare head on. Emily treats me with respect. That's something you've forgotten. His face flushed crimson. He slammed his fist against the table so hard the coffee cups rattled. Melissa flinched but stayed quiet. You think this makes you a hero? He shouted. You're pathetic, sitting here pretending you're better than the rest of us, when really you're just an old man waiting to die alone. For a moment, the fury in his eyes burned so hot I thought he might strike me. My body tensed, but I refused to move, refused to give him that satisfaction. If standing on my own 2 feet makes me pathetic, I said evenly, then maybe you should try it sometime. Melissa tugged at his arm again, this time more forcefully. Brian, stop, please. He jerked away, chest-heaving, veins bulging in his neck. Then with a growl of frustration, he stormed out the door, slamming behind him so violently the walls shook. Melissa lingered a moment longer, her eyes meeting mine with an apology she didn't speak aloud. Her lips trembled, but she only whispered, "I'm sorry," before following him into the night. The house trembled in their wake, the silence thick and suffocating. I sat back in my chair, my hands steady despite the storm that had just passed through. Every word, every insult, every slammed door was another stone laid at their own feet, building the weight that would soon crush them. From the top of the stairs, Emily appeared, her face pale with worry. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" she whispered. I nodded faintly. "I'm fine." But inside I knew something had shifted. Their desperation was growing, and desperation makes people dangerous. 2 nights after Brian's outburst, I was sitting alone at the kitchen table when Karen came home later than usual. Her heels struck the floor in sharp, angry rhythms, each step like a drumbeat announcing a verdict. She tossed her purse on the counter and stood across from me, arms crossed, her eyes blazing. "Enough games, Dad," she snapped. "You either start paying more or you're out. Do you understand me? I've already looked at senior facilities in town. You think I won't do it? Try me." Her words hit like a cold blade pressed against my throat. For a moment, I simply stared at her. The woman who once clung to my hand during thunderstorms now glared at me as if I were a stranger she wanted evicted. I clasped my hands together, steadying my breath. "I've lived in this house longer than you've had children, Karen. This isn't just 4 walls to me. It's my life." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Life you call sitting here all day. A life Patrick and I work to keep this place running. You're just taking up space." The words cut not because they were true, but because she believed them. She truly thought I was a parasite clinging to her world, when in reality she was the one feeding on mine. "You talk about respect," I said quietly. "But you've forgotten what it means." Her jaw clenched, her voice rising to a near scream. "Respect is earned, and right now you're nothing but a burden. So either step up or I'll make sure you're gone by the end of the month." Her voice carried upstairs. Patrick appeared in the hallway, lingering like a shadow. He looked down at us, his face pale, but said nothing. He never did. For a long moment, the room fell silent. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the old clock on the wall, and the rapid thump of my own heart. Finally, I rose slowly from my chair. My voice was calm, almost steady enough to frighten even myself. "Better to die with dignity, Karen, than live in a house where I'm treated like dirt." She blinked, stunned, her lips parting, but no sound escaping. The words had landed harder than I intended. She turned on her heel, muttering curses under her breath, and stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door so hard it rattled the frame. I sank back into my chair, my body trembling. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't pleaded. I had simply spoken the truth. and the truth was beginning to scare her. Later, as I sat by the window in the quiet of my room, Emily slipped in. She looked at me with wide, worried eyes. I heard Mom yelling, "Are you okay?" I forced a smile, though the ache in my chest lingered. "I'm fine, sweetheart." She sat beside me, her hand slipping into mine. "Don't let her break you, Grandpa, promise me." I squeezed her hand gently. "I won't. Not this time." Inside, I knew I had crossed a line I could never step back from. Karen thought she had delivered her final threat, but in truth, she had only quickened the storm. The next morning began like any other, the smell of coffee drifting through the kitchen, the steady tick of the hallway clock. But beneath the routine, the air felt sharp, brittle, as if one wrong word could splinter it all apart. I sat at the table, sipping from my mug, when Karen stormed in her heels, striking the tile like gunshots. "Dad," she barked, "we're not doing this anymore. I'm done waiting. If you can't pay more by the end of the week, I'm calling the senior facility. You can pack your things and let professionals take care of you." Her voice was cold, final, like a judge reading a sentence. I set my cup down, slowly meeting her eyes with quiet resolve. "You talk about respect, Karen. But what you're really talking about is control," she scoffed. "Don't twist this around. You've done nothing to help us. You sit here while we bleed ourselves dry." Before I could respond, Emily bounded down the stairs, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She froze at the sight of her mother standing over me, fists clenched. "What's going on?" she asked carefully. Karen whirled on her daughter, her anger spilling over. "Your grandfather refuses to contribute. He thinks he can just live here for free while Patrick and I shoulder everything." Emily's face hardened, her eyes narrowing in a way I hadn't seen before. She dropped her bag on the floor and stepped between us, her small frame brimming with a courage that silenced the room. "That's not true, Mom. Grandpa does more than you'll ever admit. He's given you everything, and all you do is treat him like he's worthless." Karen's mouth fell open, stunned. "Excuse me, you heard me." Emily snapped, her voice sharp with conviction. "He's not a burden. He's not some bill to be paid. He's family. And the way you talk to him, it's cruel." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with shock. Karen's face twisted with disbelief, her lips trembling as she struggled to form words. "You're taking his side after everything Patrick and I do for you?" Emily lifted her chin, her voice steady. "I'm taking the side of what's right. You've forgotten who he is, but I haven't." Her words pierced through the house like thunder. For the first time, Karen looked small, rattled, her authority shaken by the one person she thought would always stand with her. She turned sharply, muttering under her breath, and stormed out of the kitchen, her heels striking the floor like retreating gunfire. Emily turned back to me, her eyes softening though they still burned with fire. She took my hand and squeezed it tightly. "Don't let her do this to you, Grandpa. You don't deserve it." I swallowed hard, pride and sorrow twisting in my chest. "You're braver than I ever was at your age," I said softly. "Don't ever lose that." She gave me a faint smile, then grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. As the silence settled once more, I felt something stir deep inside me. Emily had spoken the truth aloud, unshaken, unafraid. And in doing so, she had become my shield in this war. The house grew quieter after Emily's outburst, but it wasn't peace. It was the uneasy calm of a battlefield just before the next attack. Karen avoided me for a few days, though I could hear her muttering upstairs, pacing back and forth with the weight of anger she couldn't let go. Patrick kept his distance, slipping past me in the hallway, with nothing more than a nod, his eyes betraying the worry he didn't dare voice. But the silence didn't last. One evening, just after sunset, Brian returned. His truck roared up the driveway, headlights slicing through the dusk like blades. He stormed into the kitchen without knocking, his face red, his chest heaving. Melissa followed, quiet, as always, wringing her hands in silent apology. Brian slammed both hands onto the table, leaning across it, until his face was inches from mine. "You think you're clever, don't you? Ignoring my calls, sitting here like you're better than us. You think you can just wash your hands of your own son." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. "I think," I said slowly, "that you've leaned on me long enough." His fists tightened, knuckles white. "Don't talk down to me, old man. You wouldn't even have this house if it weren't for us keeping it afloat." The words almost made me laugh, them keeping it afloat. Every tax bill, every insurance payment, every check had been mine. But I kept the truth sealed for just a little longer. "You're wrong," I said simply. Melissa touched his arm, whispering, "Brian, please, quiet." He barked, shrugging her off. His voice rose, shaking the walls. "You think you can make me look weak in front of my wife? You think you can stand there with nothing, acting like you're some kind of king?" His fury filled the kitchen like smoke. For a moment I thought he might actually hit me. But before he could, Emily burst through the doorway. Her face was pale, but her voice rang clear. "Stop it, Uncle Brian." He spun on her, the rage in his eyes faltering. "This isn't your business. It is my business," she snapped. "Because I live here too. And I'm sick of watching you treat him like dirt. He doesn't owe you anything. None of you do." Her words cut through the noise like a blade, leaving Brian speechless for a heartbeat. He muttered something under his breath, then stormed out, Melissa trailing behind, with tears in her eyes. The slam of the door echoed like thunder through the house. Karen appeared moments later, her face flushed from eavesdropping upstairs. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You're tearing this family apart, Dad. With your stubbornness, your secrets, you'll destroy us all." I stood slowly, my voice calm but firm. "No, Karen. I didn't destroy this family. I just stopped letting you destroy me." Her jaw dropped, but I walked past her down the hall to my room. Behind the closed door, I pulled out the folder one more time. The deed. The signed contract. Proof of everything. The storm was almost here, and this time I would be the one holding the lightning. The morning the buyers came, the house seemed to sense its own fate. Sunlight streamed through the windows in sharp beams, cutting across the floorboards like lines in a ledger. Every creak of the walls, every tick of the hallway clock carried a weight that felt final. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, calm, waiting. When the doorbell rang, Karen looked up from sorting through a stack of envelopes. She frowned, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Who's here this early?" Before she could move, I rose and walked to the door. Standing there was Tom Grant, the realtor, briefcase in hand, a polite smile on his face. Beside him stood a young couple, their 2 children clinging shyly to their legs. "Morning, Frank," Tom said warmly. "These are the Harrisons. They'll be the new owners once we close tomorrow." Karen's footsteps echoed sharply on the tile behind me. "New owners," her voice cracked like glass. Tom gave her a polite nod. "Yes, ma'am. Just a final walkthrough before signing." Her face drained of color. She stared at me, her lips trembling. "What is he talking about, Dad?" I stepped aside, gesturing the Harrisons in. "Come in," I said calmly. The family entered quietly, their voices hushed as they admired the kitchen, the open layout, the sunlight pouring through the windows. Every word, beautiful countertops, great backyard, perfect neighborhood, was another nail in the coffin of Karen's illusions. She spun on me, her voice trembling with fury. "You did this. You sold the house without telling us." "Yes," I said evenly. Patrick appeared from his office upstairs, his face pale, his tie loose. What's going on? Karen shoved the papers Tom handed her into his chest. Read this. He sold the house out from under us. Patrick scanned the documents, his hands shaking. His lips moved, reading the lines silently before he looked up at me, stunned. It's real. He owns it. He's selling it. Karen's cry split the air, half sob, half scream. You betrayed us. This is our home. I met her gaze steadily. No, Karen. This was my home. I bought it in 2004. Every check you thought you collected from me was my money moving from one account to another. I let you believe it was yours because I wanted peace. But you pushed me too far. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She stumbled back, her eyes wide, her breath ragged. Emily, who had been watching silently from the doorway, stepped forward, her voice firm. He didn't betray us, Mom. You betrayed him. You treated him like a tenant in his own house. Karen turned on her daughter, stunned into silence. The Harrisons shifted uncomfortably, sensing the storm, while Tom quietly closed his folder. We'll finalize everything tomorrow, he said gently, shaking my hand before leading the family out. The door closed, leaving the house in silence, except for the sound of Karen's ragged breathing. The truth was out now, undeniable, irreversible. And the storm had only just begun. The silence after the Harrisons left was heavier than stone. Karen stood in the middle of the kitchen, the papers trembling in her hands, her face pale and wild. Finally, she let out a strangled cry and slammed the folder onto the table. How could you do this? You've destroyed us, Dad. Where are we supposed to go? What have you done? Her voice cracked with panic, but behind it was fury, raw, desperate fury. Patrick lingered by the doorway, his hands half raised as if he wanted to calm her, but didn't dare step closer. I leaned back in my chair, steady as I'd ever been. I did what you forced me to do. You pushed, you threatened, and you treated me like I was nothing. I took back what was mine. Karen's eyes blazed, tears streaming down her face. You betrayed your own daughter, your own family. Before I could speak, Emily stepped forward. Her chin lifted, her eyes sharp with fire I'd never seen before. No, Mom. He didn't betray anyone. You did. You treated him like trash, like a burden, like some tenant you could evict. And now you're shocked that he finally stood up for himself. Karen spun on her daughter, her voice breaking. You don't understand, Emily. Without this house, we have nothing. Emily's voice rose, trembling but steady. You had everything because of him. He gave you this house. He paid every bill. And instead of respecting him, you mocked him, demanded more, pushed him toward the door like he was in the way. Don't talk about nothing, Mom. You're the one who lost everything. The words hung in the air like a strike of lightning. Patrick lowered his eyes, unable to argue. Karen staggered back as if she'd been slapped, her lips trembling, her chest heaving. You're siding with him, she whispered, her voice raw. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. I'm siding with what's right. You never saw him for who he is, but I did. Karen's sob broke loose, a sound so bitter it cut through the house. She pressed her hands to her face and stumbled upstairs, her heels clattering against the steps like retreating thunder. Patrick followed quietly, his head bowed, leaving Emily and me alone in the kitchen. She turned to me, her eyes still wet, her voice softer now. I couldn't let her talk to you that way anymore, Grandpa. You don't deserve it. I reached for her hand, my own trembling not from weakness, but from pride. You've got more courage than I ever had. Don't lose it. She squeezed my hand, her jaw firm. They don't see you, but I do. And when everything falls apart, I'll still be here. Her words wrapped around me like armor, For years, I had lived in silence, letting their voices drown mine out. But now I wasn't alone. Emily had spoken the truth aloud, and there was no taking it back. The storm had broken inside this family, and nothing would ever be the same again. The house stayed uneasy for 2 days after Karen's collapse, but quiet was never meant to last. I knew Brian would come again. He always did, with anger sharper than before. And when his truck roared into the driveway just after dusk, gravel spitting under the tires, I braced myself. The door flew open, and he stormed inside, his voice booming before he even reached the kitchen. "What the hell is this, Dad? You sold the house." Karen told me everything. Melissa followed timidly, her eyes rimmed with red, her steps hesitant, as if she already knew she would be forced to watch another storm she couldn't stop. Brian slammed his fists down on the table so hard the salt shaker toppled over. His chest heaved as he leaned toward me, his eyes wild. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined us all. Where are we supposed to go?" I stayed seated, my voice calm but steady. "I did what I had to do, Brian. I reclaimed what was mine." His face darkened, fury twisting his features. "Yours. You think this place was ever yours. We carried you. We paid the bills, we kept the lights on, and you," I cut him off, my voice low. "Every bill you think you covered came from me. Every payment was mine. The house was mine from the beginning. You lived here because I let you." For a moment his rage faltered, his mouth opening as if to argue, but nothing came. He turned, red fists clenching tighter. "You selfish old fool," he spat. "You'll regret this. You'll die alone in some dingy apartment and no one will care." Before I could answer, Emily stepped into the kitchen. She'd been upstairs studying, but now her eyes blazed with a fury that mirrored his. "Stop it, Uncle Brian," she shouted. "You don't talk to him like that." Brian swung toward her, his anger spilling over. "Stay out of this. You don't know what he's done. He's destroyed everything." Emily's voice shook, but her resolve didn't. "No, he didn't destroy anything. You and Mom did every time you treated him like he was nothing. All he did was finally stand up for himself. And you can't stand it." The silence that followed was electric, like the air before a lightning strike. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. She stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Brian, please, stop. Just stop." But Brian's fury wasn't done. He glared at me, his voice low and venomous. "This isn't over. You think you've won, but you've just made an enemy out of your own son." I met his gaze without flinching. "If telling the truth makes me your enemy, then so be it." His face twisted with hatred, and for a moment I thought he might lunge at me. But Melissa grabbed his arm, desperately, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Brian, please," she cried. With a final growl, he jerked free and stormed out the door, slamming so hard the walls rattled. Melissa lingered, her face crumpling with sorrow. She turned to me, her lips trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know how to stop him anymore." Then she followed him into the night, leaving me and Emily in the quiet wreckage of their rage. Emily moved closer, her hand gripping mine. "You're not alone, Grandpa," she said firmly. And in that moment, I knew the storm had reached its peak, but the final lightning strike was still to come. The night after Brian's outburst, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Karen hadn't come down from her room. Patrick moved quietly like a man walking on eggshells, and Emily stayed close, her presence steady as a lantern in the dark. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder of documents in front of me, my fingers tracing the bold letters of my name, Franklin Miller. Owner. It was time. When Karen finally emerged, her eyes were swollen. Her jaw tight with fury, she marched straight into the kitchen. "Enough!" she shouted. You owe us an explanation, Dad. How could you sell the house? How could you lie to us all these years? Patrick stood behind her, pale, silent, but listening. Emily slipped into the room, standing near me, her eyes fixed on her mother. I leaned back, meeting Karen's glare calmly. You want the truth? Fine. You want to know why I wrote you those checks every month? Why I never argued when you shoved bills in my face because I thought peace was worth the price? I wanted to keep this family together, even if it meant letting you believe something that wasn't true. Her eyes narrowed, confusion flickering. What are you talking about? I opened the folder and spread the papers across the table, the deed, the lottery stub, the bank statements. This house has been mine since 2004. I bought it outright after winning the lottery. Every bill you waved at me, every payment you claimed to make was nothing more than money shuffling from one of my accounts to another. You were never carrying me. I was carrying you. The words landed like thunder. Patrick's face drained of color as he scanned the papers, his lips moving silently. Karen's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out, her body trembling, as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted. You lied, she whispered finally, her voice hoarse. No, I said firmly. I kept the peace. I let you think you were in control because I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, you'd treat me with respect if I gave you what you wanted. But you pushed. You threatened. You forgot who I was. And now the truth is here, whether you like it or not. Karen's tears turned hot, her voice rising into a scream. You betrayed us. You ruined everything. Where are we supposed to go now? Emily stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. No, Mom. He didn't ruin anything. He gave you everything, and you threw it away because you couldn't see past your own pride. Karen spun on her daughter, stunned, but Emily didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, her hand resting firmly on my shoulder. He's my grandfather. He's the man who built this family, and you treated him like a stranger in his own home. That's the betrayal, not his. The room fell silent. Karen sobbed. Patrick looked like a man broken in two, and for the first time in years, I felt no shame, no burden, only freedom. The morning of closing day dawned crisp and clear, the kind of morning that carries a weight you can feel in your bones. I dressed carefully, pulling on the plaid shirt Margaret always said made me look strong, and slipped the final envelope into my jacket. When I stepped into the kitchen, Karen was waiting, her face hollow from a sleepless night. If you go through with this, she whispered, her voice trembling, I'll never forgive you. I poured my coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch. Forgiveness was never what I needed, Karen. Respect was, and you never gave it. Her eyes filled with tears, but I walked past her without another word. Emily met me at the door, her backpack still slung over her shoulder. She looked up at me with shining eyes. Can I come with you, Grandpa? I touched her cheek gently. Not this time, sweetheart. You've got your whole life ahead of you. This is mine to finish. She hugged me tightly, her tears dampening my shirt. I'm proud of you. I kissed the top of her head. That's all I need. When I arrived at the real estate office, the signing took less than an hour. Tom slid the papers across the table, his voice brisk but warm. Congratulations, Frank. It's done. You're free. I signed my name one last time, Franklin Miller, seller. The weight of years seemed to lift from my shoulders in that single moment. Later that afternoon, I returned to the house on Maplewood Lane one final time. The windows gleamed in the sunlight. The maples swayed gently in the breeze. Karen stood on the porch. Her arms crossed her face, pale. Patrick sat on the steps, staring at the ground. Emily leaned against the railing, her eyes fixed on me, steady and proud. Karen's voice broke as I approached. So it's over, just like that, you sold our home. I stopped at the foot of the steps, my voice calm but firm. It was never your home. It was mine. I gave you everything, and you repaid me with disrespect. This was the only way left. She let out a sob, her body shaking. You've destroyed this family. I shook my head slowly. No, Karen. I revealed it. Patrick's face was drawn, his lips tight as if he wanted to speak but couldn't. Emily stepped closer, slipping her hand into mine. You don't owe them anything, Grandpa. Not anymore. I nodded, the tightness in my chest easing at her words. I turned from the porch, my footsteps steady on the path I had walked 1,000 times. The cab waited at the curb. Emily called out softly, I love you, Grandpa. I looked back once, just once, at the house I had built, the house that had become a battlefield. I love you too, I said. Then I climbed into the cab and didn't look back again. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their demands, their threats, or their contempt. I carried only my dignity, and that was enough. As the cab pulled away from Maplewood Lane, I felt a strange peace settle over me. I had lost a house, but I had reclaimed something far more important, my dignity. For years, I let myself be treated like a tenant in my own home, believing silence would preserve peace. But silence, when paired with disrespect, only feeds cruelty. The truth is, respect must be mutual. No matter how much you give, if people see you only as a burden, they will take until there is nothing left. My children believed they could corner me with threats, ultimatums, and guilt. What they never understood was that real strength is not measured by how much you endure. It's measured by the moment you finally say enough. And though I walked away with fewer possessions, I left with something they could never take, the freedom to live on my own terms. To anyone listening, if you are a parent or a child, remember this: love without respect is not love at all. If you've ever treated your family like an obligation rather than a gift, it's time to think again before it's too late. Have you ever faced a betrayal like mine? How did you handle it? And what did you learn? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening. And remember, dignity is worth more than any house or fortune.